WHHI translator station W215AQ 90.9 Madison with talk about issues that matter to you.
Hello, I'm Jean Faraka, and this is All About Food on the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. I'm fond of saying that food is never just food. It's memory, it's culture, it's connection, it's family, it's old world as often as not. It's so many things. And most importantly, it's what we all have in common. After all, we all eat. This hour is a special All About Food in that we are going to spend an hour with Ida Lee Chiappetta Siewert. She is a native of Wisconsin Rapids. She lives in Wisconsin Rapids and has for quite some time now. But she actually grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the third child born to Italian immigrants. And it's only in recent years that she got the idea of writing a family cookbook. Well, it's now in its third printing, and I have in my hand a copy of the most recent edition, which is a special hardback edition just for family members. It's called La Cucina de Mamma e Papa. And this is quite a project that began some years ago, and Ida Lee joins us by telephone to talk about how it all began. Ida Lee?
Buongiorno, Jean.
Buongiorno.
È una bella giornata.
È vera.
There is an Italian saying that goes, ogni giorno è una bella giornata. And it came true when I went on my first visit to my roots, and you would take a walk, and the people would hang over their balconies, and they would say, buongiorno, una bella giornata, and it didn't matter whether it was cloudy or rainy or sunny. So every day, and it's an attitude I think that they have.
Well, you obviously have acquired it. Now, I understand that all this began with actually a high school project. A senior came to you.
Yes.
And tell us about all of that.
All right. Well, first, may I just start by saying that you stole my introduction, because the kitchen was the hub of the family in most Italian families, and it was not only a place to cook, but we shared and we laughed and sometimes we cried. So there was a lot of emotion that came out of an Italian kitchen, and I think that what came out of it are the stories. The Native Americans, I feel, do storytelling the best. They seem to retell the stories, and they keep the legends alive, and then they pass them on from one generation to another. And I think that that's what happened to us. About 5 or 6 years ago, this young Irish gal was to write a research project on her Irish heritage. And she had known quite a bit about her own family, so she asked the teacher, Audrey Scheid, if she could write about some other country. So her teacher put her in touch with me, and we met for about 4 sessions at her high school. And we just sat across from each other, and we visited. And I told her about the family and how they came and the foods that we ate. And so that was the beginning. Well, after she was through with it, the light went on. And because of this, Colleen, I needed to go deeper. I felt personally that I needed to write some more. The children had begun to leave home, and one was in Madison, my Charles, and one was in New York, and they would be calling me, and they'd say, Mama, how do you make frittata? How many eggs do you put in a meatball recipe? And lasagna, do we put hard-boiled eggs in? Well, that was a start for me. And when I worked with this young girl, I realized that I had to make the recipe and measure the ingredients and write them down, because I do a lot of it by memory.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, was that hard for you?
It was hard, because you think that you're using about a cup of breadcrumbs, and maybe it was a cup and a half or two.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a little hard. It wasn't so hard for the seasonings or, an egg or two, but there were some things. Flour to make the pasta. It says, 2 or 3 cups. but you might need less and you might need a little more. So I did have to do a lot of making and writing down.
And this even for family members who had watched you do it and, knew how it should taste and all of that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I found that, Mama, the meatballs they're not as soft as yours. And then I'd say, besides the egg, I put in maybe a fourth of a cup of water.
Oh, and
water.
You forgot to tell him that.
Well, and every egg is a different size.
That's right. So that's how you make the meatballs so soft, huh? It's a little bit of water.
A little bit of water besides your egg, even if you have an extra large egg.
Uh-huh.
And so they're really supposed to be much more tender. And so add some water because it's not going to hurt it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happened is that I...
Now he's going to ask you how much water, Mama.
That's right. And then I say start out with a little, and that's not much. Oh, dear.
So we're back to the beginning again.
Right. So then there was a one-day workshop, and it was for writers, and it was held by Mary Croft, a retired professor from the UW Stevens Point. And there were about 8 or 10 of us that wrote stories. And after her one-day workshop, we got together. In fact, we started at Edith Nash's, and we would read some stories, write some stories, ask for some help or suggestions or changes that would improve the story. The group still exists, and we call it the Riverwood Roundtable. But the reason for that name began because 4 or 5 of us all lived on one lane. Mm-hmm. And so the nature of the group has changed a lot. Most of us were all writers. There were a couple that had published things, but most of us were beginners. But
so when did it actually come into your mind? I'm going to write a cookbook.
After the encounter with
Colleen.
With Colleen, and the fact that the kids were asking me for the recipes, but I didn't want it. One of my other children, Mary Kay, says, "Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, Mother, to put together a bunch of recipes. Well, you just copy them." But it was the stories that went with it. And that was when...
you wouldn't have been content to just pass along a bunch of recipes.
No.
Yeah, the stories had to go ahead. It's like that's the connective tissue.
Exactly.
And that's probably recreating, I'm guessing now, the atmosphere in the family kitchen when you were growing up.
Exactly.
When people were working together, in a common project, and they were telling stories.
Exactly. And so then after, excuse me, after writing a few of these up, one of the girls in the group, Gloria Zager, just out of the blue said, "Well, if you write them, I'll put them on the computer." And so it was a real gift to me, and so I took her up on it. And I'd give her 8 or 10 pages, and she'd go home and put them on the computer. So now this went on for several years, Jean.
Now, what kinds of stories were you writing?
Well, the ones in the book pertain to perhaps every section about the appetizers and what kind of appetizers we had, the making of wine that Dad made every year, the butchering of a pig. A package came from Italy, and what was in it, and I describe it. Mm-hmm. It was that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And these stories and memories came back to you as you...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, I think...
Little vignettes.
The vignettes. And as I think about it, we talk about the new technology in the computer age. Well, we've had a computer, and that's our brain. And I think that we all have these stories stored. And now then I began to retrieve them, and I was writing them down. Okay,
so you've got Gloria commuting these to the computer, and so the book is well on its way at this point.
Yes, it is, and I think just to give people an idea, last night I kind of brought up some of the costs. And I started out by buying like a dozen of 3-ring binders at Walmart. They were $2.34 each. Well, my initial was that we were going to make maybe about 50 because I thought I had that many relatives and close friends. And so from about, I look back from October of 98 to March of 01, I had purchased about 250 binders. And so that cost was about $570. Well,
how'd you get from 50 to 500, Ida Lee?
Well, no, it was from 250. No, the cost was 570.
Oh.
The first big batch of 244 cost me about 570. So I was shooting for 50, and then I just people would say you've got to do more. Now then, after Gloria had put it all on the computer, and my son had taken the photos and put them on a disc, and then combined the two, then I took them to a local printer. And that first printing...
In the spiral-bound book.
In the spiral-bound. Well, we'll go into that. The printing alone of all the sheets of the first batch was something like 16,000 sheets. And that was the first 75 or so. But anyway, that cost of the printing was $772. So we got up to about, he charged me something like $450 a book. Well, then Gloria and I...
But cost, of course, wasn't your first consideration.
No,
here.
You know that until last night, I didn't realize what I had been spending.
Oh, I see. You went back and did some accounting.
Yes. I really didn't. It was like a dream. It was like I needed to do this. And fortunately, with the help of my son who worked on the photos and picked up the tab at no cost to Mother, and the beautiful gift that Gloria gave me by putting it on the computer, then it just kind of gelled. So really, I wasn't cost conscious.
And was it worth it?
Definitely. The thrill that I'm getting now is that I not only have people that want the book that know me, but a lot of the strangers are coming out of the woodwork. What happened is that there was an article written in our local paper, and as a result of that, the library called and asked if I would give a presentation. And you do expect friends there when you're going to be doing something like this. But the ones that really came up to me and said, I almost, you conjured up all kinds of memories that I had of my grandma and the food I ate. And I said, write them down.
And the interesting thing about this is that those people that said that to you weren't necessarily Italian.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. In fact, being in Wisconsin Rapids, you know that you can count the Italian people on one hand.
So then there was a Rotary Club newsletter.
Yes, my husband was responsible for that, unbeknownst to me, and we're both Rotarians, and he sent an article that was in our paper, and there's a section in the back of the Rotary magazine that's called Rotarian Authors. And so when that appeared last fall, excuse me, I began getting oodles of mail. And what was interesting is they came from Pensacola, they came from Louisiana, they came from Georgia, North Carolina, and they were most of them were men. And I thought that was interesting. May I just read a couple of lines from some of them?
Oh, sure.
One of them is a man of the cloth, a Monsignor, and he wants one for himself because he loves Italian food, and another one for his parishioner. Then there was one that came from a gentleman that wrote, my wife and I are both immigrants. Teresa's Calabrese and I am Abruzze. We came to the U.S. in 1930 when we were both 2 years of age. And so he told me a little bit about himself, and he was a successful businessman, sent me some of his own private information about his business. Another one purchased the book because she said, it sounds so very interesting. I'm sorry. Since my grandparents were from Italy, and they both came over on the boat when they were teenagers, and they settled in Pittsburgh. So she goes on to tell about her family. And then just one more, there was one that the last name is Merano of this family. and she writes that it's a book that would make a wonderful Christmas present, providing the connection of the area of Merano.
And what's the connection with Merano?
Well, Merano Marchesato was where the little village that my parents were born in.
Uh-huh.
See, but their last name was Merano, and evidently they did make a trip there. They were not able to go or find their original people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting to me. First of all, because most of them were men,
mm-hmm.
and I think that a lot of men are more interested in food than we give credit. We think mamas are always making the meals.
Well, after all, the book is La Cucina di Mamma e Papa.
Correct. Correct.
We're talking with Idalie Chiappetta Siewert. She has created a family cookbook called La Cucina, which is now in its third edition. And as we've just been hearing, she's received requests for it from all over the country. I'm Jean Faraka. You can join in by calling 1-800-642-1234 and in Madison, 263-1890. We're talking about how to create a family cookbook. This is All About Food on the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio.
This Saturday night, it's Higher Ground and an encore broadcast with the Madison Rep, Footlights Productions, Evansville Community Theater, the River Valley Players, and Stageworks Projects starting at 7. So please tune in right here on the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio.
Contributors to Wisconsin Public Radio include Whole Foods Market on University Avenue in Madison, featuring natural, organic, and specialty foods. Whole Foods Market. Great tasting food is only natural.
Ideas 90.9 WHHI translator station W215AQ in Madison.
Now, you've heard Idalie mention Edith Nash, another Riverwood Lane resident in Wisconsin Rapids. And Edith will be my guest next Monday, talking about grandparenting a retarded child. That's at 10. Idalie, the food that you have preserved in this cookbook is regional. It comes from southern Italy, from the province of Calabria, where both of your parents were from. And it is unique to that province. And you had the opportunity to go back and visit. You're first-generation American-born. Tell us about that visit and what you learned from that.
Well, when we got there, I knew that perhaps the most interesting, I had made connection by phone because some of my family was in the shoe and a beautiful men's haberdashery. And my mother, when living, would ask my brother to get his tailors from Italy. So we had Italian tailors that worked in the United States in Kenosha. And when I was ready to leave, this gentleman that had been in the U.S. 25 or more years returned to Italy to retire. And I asked if Alex was, do you have a telephone number? So I did, and I called Italy. And yes, indeed, I had some cousins there. And so we took a train from Rome, and I thought I was going to be meeting because I had made a phone call, and I met on the phone a female cousin through marriage. And I expected to see her and her son at the train station. Well, what happened is it was just like out of the movies. I was looking for a lady and a son, and I didn't see any. And I saw two young men, and I went up to one of them and I said, Saverio, and he said, Ida, and we hugged. And I didn't have a red rose in my lapel or anything. But that was how I met them. And the two young fellas, one was the relative and the other was just a friend. And we got to the home, and my heart is pounding because I was going to my mother's home. It was very small, and I would almost say by American standards, a little primitive, very primitive. And I slept in her bedroom.
Wow.
So it was a very emotional trip for both me and for John.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the very beginning. And the food, well, at 11 o'clock, you could just, you could tell by the time that they were fixing lunch, and because the olive oil.
You could tell by the smells,
by
you mean.
the smell, the whole little countryside or the community, which just smelled of olive oil and garlic. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the beginning.
Now, Ida, did you have to do much research in putting together your book? For example, there's a section in the book about the olive groves and the olives.
Yes.
The harvest of olives.
Right.
And the preparation of olives. Did you know all of that from experience?
No. Uh-huh. No. I knew what I saw in Italy, and then I learned about the first press from Italy. I just knew that we used olive oil. And in Italy, I learned that they had the olive oil in like a 50-gallon drum.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that we went to the groves, but you see, it was the wrong time of the year because they harvest them in the fall.
Mm.
And I have never been there when they're harvesting the olives. And then on my parents' the lot, there is one of the oldest olive press. It's deteriorated and it's not functioning, but it is a place where the olives were made into olive oil. And the way they do it is that they go picking, like we pick strawberries, and you give some to the owners,
mm-hmm.
and then they give you back the oil.
Mm-hmm.
But you've also picked a lot more.
Now, you write in your book that your grandfather had a chestnut grove.
Right.
And your mother used to go riding with him
Right.
on horseback to gather the chestnuts.
Right.
So what place do chestnuts occupy in the family cooking?
Oh, it's we have to have them during the holidays, from Thanksgiving to Christmas. It's a shame, but they're kind of high, and you don't get too many for a pound, maybe about $4 a pound. But you have to roast some chestnuts by the fire. But we did them on top of the stove.
Mm-hmm.
It was just in fact, sometimes you can just take a pie pan that a throwaway and poke some holes and put them on a burner, and you make a little slit in them, and the slit kind of curls back, and there is an aroma. Now, in the big cities like Toronto and Chicago, when it's hockey time, or you see the vendors, and in Italy, of course, and there's a little vendor on the corners, and they sell the hot chestnuts, and they're so good. Well, you know they are.
From New York, I remember, I have that memory. They say that smell is the most enduring memory.
Yes,
the sense of smell preserves memory better than any other sense.
Definitely.
Definitely. And walking down Fifth Avenue, smelling the chestnuts roasting in the fall.
Right, right.
We're talking with Ida Lee. It's Chiappetta Siewert. I want to call it Chiappetta because I had a friend in college who had that name.
CH in Italian is really Chiappetta.
Right.
And but being an American, and the teachers started calling us Chiappetta, and that's why most of the people say Chiappetta.
Ida Lee has put together a family cookbook, which is now in its third edition. It's called La Cucina, preserving the memory of the cuisine of her family and her region and her culture. And this was done initially for just family members, for her children, in order to pass along a heritage. But what do you know? She's now getting requests from all over the country for copies of her book. If you'd like to find out how this is done, or have your own family culture to preserve and you'd like to tell us about it, the number to call is 1-800-642-1234. In Madison, 263-1890. Perhaps you've done a family cookbook of your own or are contemplating it. This is all about food, and that's our topic this hour. Marianne joins us from Cucina. Hi, Marianne. Go ahead.
Hi, Jean. How are you?
Just fine, thanks.
I feel like I'm listening to my life story, listening to Ida. The chestnut scenario. It's the holiday season, and I really miss that. I live up north, and there is just nowhere to buy them. And again, I feel like I'm listening to my story in terms of sitting around and my grandma had one of those big black wood-burning stoves, and it's just so reminiscent of my childhood. And I guess I call my mom, I'd say at least weekly, to get a recipe. How do you actually get started? I mean, I realize you sit down, you start writing the recipes down, but how can you actually go about getting this published or even getting someone interested in publishing it for you?
Well, I think start out by just feeling that you're going to do it because you want the family to have the stories.
Got it.
And I really, never started out for it to be published. And it's just put down what you remember. You started to say, I remember when. And the things that you asked your mother. And you will find that it just kind of pours out of you. So don't make it a point that I'm going to write this because I'm going to send it in to be published. And I think a little, and it wasn't done all at one time. I'm saying 6 years.
Okay.
And the other thing was I frustrated? Indeed, I was. There were some times that I hated it. And my John, my hubby, is a man of few words, but always encouraging. And he'd say, honey, just it's okay, just write it the way you're writing it. And then Gloria, the one that was putting it on the computer for me, and I wanted to dump it. And she'd say, oh, well, just put it aside.
What was it that was so frustrating, Idly?
I didn't like what I was writing. And then I changed some of it. And I don't feel personally that I'm a gifted writer. I am myself. And so it doesn't matter that we're not, a well-known or known for art. Because you, Jean, are so fluent, and you would have no problem putting something like this down. But don't think of it as a published book.
No, Ida, did you do it more like a journal almost?
No.
No.
Write the little stories all by themselves.
I see. Okay.
And then start putting down, if it's an appetizer, start thinking about the appetizer.
Got it.
When I made the pasta, I thought, I've never made pasta. I really have only learned in the last 10 or 15 years. My mother made it all by hand, and she had, my children bought me a fancy Cuisinart. I hated it. And so then I started, I was given a hand crank, the old-fashioned, and they're wonderful.
I'm familiar.
You're familiar.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, because when my folks come to town, they're from Jersey, and they come out at least twice a year, and we always have friends over because they make these very elaborate meals, homemade pasta. The meatballs, no matter how hard I try, they just do not taste like my mom's. And it's just something. They're getting older. They're both approaching 80, and I think, boy, I hate to see these recipes. And again, I cook Italian not as frequently as my husband would like, because as a child, we were kind of forced to eat pasta 3 times a week, and
right.
I'm just not that hot on it as I used to be. But when my parents are in town, I mean, rest assured, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays, we're having pasta on that table.
Because in Italy, they have it every day.
Right.
But, well, that you've got to start. And you know what? If you're with your mother or family, and she might be reluctant, but maybe use a little tape recorder, because I wish now that I had, when I was first married and had all these little children running around, I didn't have time to go get a tape recorder. But just word of mouth, just having her tell you, and maybe watching her now again, and then saying, let's measure it.
Right, because that's been my big problem. I'll call her for a recipe, and she's not sure. In fact, over the holidays, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or if I'm pronouncing it. We called it struvula, which was like these dough balls that we dipped in honey and then sprinkled with jimmies and nuts.
It's strufoli. That's what it's called.
Oh, that we used to call it struvula, and I tried to make it, and she just was, well, you put a little of this. And, I mean, I had a real tough time. The honey wasn't working for me. And, it seems like a lot of the times I call her for recipes. She's like you, she doesn't measure things, and so sometimes I can't reproduce what she made, but I try, and it's fun trying.
Well, I think what you're making probably tastes very good.
Well, it's just a pleasure to listen to your show, and Jean, as always, I love these Friday food shows.
Oh, well, thanks so much for calling in.
Happy holidays to both of you.
Thank
to you,
you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Marta is next in Baraboo, and again, we have open lines. If you'd like to join in, we're talking about how to create a family cookbook with Ida Lee Siewert. The number is 1-800-642-1234. In Madison, 263-1890. Go ahead, Marta.
Hi, this is a subject near and dear to my heart because my mom has passed away about 5 years ago. But she has, all of us have many of her recipes that she either got growing up or from my father's family. But interestingly enough, all the recipes she received from friends, the names are on them, who she received them from. And the part that we find so amusing and wonderful and dear to our heart is, in recipes, it will say things like, if it doesn't feel right, add a little more flour or a little more this. Or if you can't get that, then leave it out. And we do the best we can, and it's never quite as good as Mom's, but it is wonderful.
But it brings back some warm feelings, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, because my mother was a fabulous cook, and it is just, it's like having her in our kitchen again.
Well, you make me think of the greens that we had every day. The Italians eat a lot of endive and escarole and chicory, which is dandelions, romaine lettuce, mustard greens, rapa, I think we used to call them. And when I was writing about that, I didn't only just say that, but I recalled that as a little girl, I had to go to the grocery store and I had to buy 3 pounds of escarole. And I can still see the escarole in a bushel basket. And so that would be the kind of thing that maybe you could do. Going back and then she'd wash them. I can still see her washing them. And then we'd put, I didn't do any of the cooking. I didn't cook at all.
What's interesting, Ida Lee, is that you've mentioned that as a child, you took all this for granted and you didn't think much about the kind of food you were eating or the way it was prepared. It was simply part and parcel of everyday life.
Right.
It was only in recollection that you realized this was a unique way of cooking, that it was, part of a whole way of life that you wanted to pass along and preserve.
As I got older, I remember wishing that I wasn't so Italian. And I remember going to Lake Forest College for about 6 months, and we commuted from Kenosha, and we had a sack lunch. And everybody else had a sandwich, and it usually was that gummy Wonder Bread with peanut butter and jelly. And I wished I had one of those because I never knew what that was.
And what did you have in your sack lunch?
Whole wheat bread. Whole wheat bread that my mother made, and it was very dense. And and maybe a little bit of meat or some I can't even remember, prosciutto. But I really would have traded anything for one of theirs. But I didn't realize how good now, that's another thing that came up, that we ate healthier, even though now it's like a fad. We're very conscious of what we eat and that we should broil everything. My father broiled everything all the time. We broiled the green peppers and until they're charred black. You've probably done it many times, Jean. And then you peel them, you put them in a bag. And then for about 20 minutes, you just set them aside. You don't really time them. The skins kind of become soft. And you peel them. And then you just drizzle olive oil over them and some garlic.
Yeah, so the other kids were bringing their mushy peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in their lunch boxes, and you had pepperoni arrostini in your sack lunch, and you're thinking, why can't I be like the Irish kids? It's the same old story. This is amazing. Ida Lee Siewert is with us talking about her experiences growing up in Kenosha, Wisconsin. She is a native of Wisconsin Rapids, has been living there many years, and has recently, over a period of, I think, 6 years, put together a cookbook called La Cucina. And actually, anybody can order a copy of this. Isn't that right, Ida Lee?
Yes. I have I've decided that I would use a box number, if I can give it
Oh, sure.
my name and box 186.
Post Office Box 186.
Correct.
Wisconsin
Rapids 54494.
54494.
At this moment, all of the books have been spoken for, but another shipment is coming in, and within the next 3 or 4 weeks, I would have some. So if you can be patient, if somebody's interested.
So the topic is how to create a family cookbook, and why bother? I'm Jean Faraka. This is All About Food on the Ideas Network of Wisconsin Public Radio. The number to call. Perhaps you have a story of your own to tell about your family and its cooking, or the cookbook that you have imagined creating, or maybe have already done so. 1-800-642-1234. In Madison, 263-1890.
Some critics call V.S. Naipaul the world's greatest living writer, but his harsh views on Islam and the Third World have sparked enormous controversy. I'm Jim Fleming. Sunday afternoon, on To the Best of Our Knowledge, Naipaul talks about his life as a writer. Also, poetry for the ages. We'll hear Yeats, Auden, and Langston Hughes read their own work. To the Best of Our Knowledge, Sunday from 1 to 3 on WPR.
Looking for the name of a guest interviewed on Wisconsin Public Radio? How about a website or telephone number? Our website may be able to help at WPR.org, or call listener services at 1-800-747-7444.
WHHI translator station W215AQ 90.9 Madison. Talk about issues that matter to you.
Coming up on Monday, we're going to talk about civil liberties and their threatened erosion in this country. And at 10, Edith Nash joins us to talk about grandparenting a retarded child. Joanne is next in Watertown. Oops, we just lost that call. Oh, no, here it is. Joanne, go ahead.
I just wanted to share a few experiences that we had in Tuscany. We are not Italian, but we love Italian food, and I will add Ida Lee's cookbook to many other Italian books. But anyway, we spent some time in Tuscany, and on a vineyard. Italy has many, they're not bed and breakfasts, they're regulated by the government, and you may stay on vineyards or whatever, and they're wonderful. Anyway, we stayed there for a couple of weeks, and one of my trips, or our trips every other day, was across the hills into the city, and that had a grocery store with 37 checkouts, all filled. And the most wonderful food. There, in that store, you could touch the fruits and vegetables and put them, if you had a gloved hand, a plastic gloved hand. In small markets, you don't dare touch, you point. But anyway, we were having company, so I wanted to get something for an appetizer. Well, I couldn't speak Italian, so I'm pointing. I knew enough when I was in the meat department not to get equine. But other than that, I was lost. So I'm pointing to this spread, and he has a small container, and he put just a little bit in. And, of course, I'm motioning more, and I have no idea what it costs. So he did that. Then I saw another interesting spread, and I said, well, I'd like some of that. And the same thing ensued, more. Well, we had company that evening, and the man walked in the door, and he said, Joanne, you have truffles. I had no idea that I bought truffle spread. The other was pâté foie gras.
Oh, boy.
And then along the roadside, I'd go back. I'd live in Italy if we could take our friends and family.
So would I.
But we see this truck, and he's selling mushrooms. Well, I didn't know then that porcini are the creme de la creme of mushrooms. So 2 kilo for around $8. Well, if you've priced porcini in the United States,
that's cheap.
That is, well, I think in Seattle it's like $29 a pound. But anyway, then we have a friend who is an avid mushroom. He grows shiitake, and he loves to cook with mushrooms. So we had to go to this mushroom festival on top of a mountain.
Ooh.
And it was so exciting because they had long tables, first of all, with poisonous mushrooms of every kind, and then another long table with all edible mushrooms. And
what a great way to learn.
I don't know too much about mushrooms, but it was wonderful. And we took home posters for him and all sorts of things. But the other thing, I couldn't get over this grocery store. Oh, then I picked grapes. We were staying on a vineyard, and of course the first few days I couldn't go in because that was very specialized. They were picking all the, can't even think of the name of them, but toward the last, when they were mixing grapes, he said, "Okay, Joanne," and this was an owner from Chicago. He said, you can come out and help. By the time I climbed up and down the hills, across the rocks, in the hot sun, I think I picked for 10 minutes, and I was exhausted.
That's a wonderful
Great story.
Thank you so much for calling. That's great. Just great. And Brenda's next in Spring Green. Hi, Brenda.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the show. It's a great show. My husband's from a family that's Italian and from the East Coast, and a lot of his memories and his recipes are all from his family. We took a trip over to Italy this year and fell in love and would move there if we could too. But my story is about my mother. We always joked, or he joked with me, that my family is a farm family from Iowa, and a lot of kids, 16 children my mother raised, and I call her on a regular basis to find out how much whatever to put into the beef and noodles I'm making or something, and she's we'd like her to write down her recipes for us, but she's always said she threw meals together. She never cooked. She threw them together because the amount of work she had to do. And my memories of cooking are peeling 10 pounds of potatoes, watching Gilligan's Isle, and every night, because that's how much it took. So, but there's still wonderful stories. She has great stories, and she's a very sarcastic, funny person. And she said, you can always do cinnamon rolls. They can be punched down several hundred times because she'd never get to them in time, and they'd be the size of footballs on the top of the stove raising, and she'd just push them in and put them in the oven. But they're great, and I just can't get her to understand that. That was, my husband laughed, the salad in Iowa is always pink or green or blue. It's never leafy. It's, got marshmallows and is considered a salad. But it's a lot of stuff like that I just can't get her to write those things down. And I'd like
you
to
have to go home then, and you have to cook with her and just say, "Let's make because I want to learn how." And you watch her, and then maybe you do the measuring. Because I think as we get older, it's kind of a chore. And Mother probably doesn't want to take the time. Mm-hmm. It's hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe collaboration is the answer.
That's probably a good idea. Get some. Because I just think there's things there that are so wonderful. Even the stories are more important to me than the recipes at this point. But
exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the show.
Thanks for the call. Tracy joins in from Pewaukee next. Hi, Tracy.
Hi. Thank you for the show. This is wonderful, near and dear to my heart. I just wanted to comment, I guess, on the bread that you were talking about, the wheat bread. I have a little story about that. Are you there?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. It sounded like you cut out. I come from a background. My mother is all Italian. My father is all Irish. Mm-hmm. Wonderful combination, I know. But I remember going to grade school and coming home one day to find that we were going to be served store-bought bread. And my sister and I cried because it wasn't our whole wheat bread. And so we had this wheat bread all growing up. My mother constantly made bread, and it was such a wonderful experience growing up. And to this day, I still don't like store-bought bread.
Well, isn't it wonderful that we've gone full circle here? Because now I don't think a lot of people crave the old-fashioned. White sliced bread. We've had an introduction of European-style bakeries that is changing the way people think about bread, I think. I hope. But
the best bread that I have been eating comes from my Charles and Joni when they come from Madison. It's Toronto. Mm-hmm. And it's a very dense bread.
Yeah, it'll last much longer than most.
It surely will.
Idly, you say in your book that you don't bake bread.
No, I don't. I guess, I don't have the people to bake for. I mean, there's just John and myself now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't have the desire. I'd rather make pasta than I would bread.
And how do you make the pasta? I know you have some wonderful photographs of being in Italy with a relative, and there she was rolling out the dough on what looked like a long pole. And then stripping it and hanging the strips over the...
Right.
Well, I don't know what exactly... It was some sort of device. I know my grandmother used to hang this.
Well, it's almost like a broomstick. And you roll it out with that, and of course I cannot do what they did. They can roll it out so thin it becomes the size of a dinette table, a round dinette table. And then it was... cut into strips or put in through the machine, and then depending on the size that they wanted. But
this was fettuccine they were making.
Yes, but now I make it. I just make it like a couple of. I don't know if I have the recipe in there now, but any cookbook, Italian cookbook, will have the like Biba Cagioni from Sacramento talks very. In depth about pasta, and it's just about 3 cups. All you need is flour and eggs, and I make a little mountain, a little mold on top of the counter. You don't use a dish, and then you make a little well, and then you break in 2 or 3 eggs, and then you're beating the fork, and you're adding the bread from this little well until it all gets together. Now that's where it might be a little tricky, but it's sticky, and then if it's sticky, you just add a little more flour, and then you let it rest for about 10-15 minutes before you cut off a chunk and then use one of those old-fashioned, as I call them. They still make them, pasta slicers. So I don't break bread. But one of the things that comes up now is that a lady from the church had called me, and she wanted me to, after she read the article in the paper, wondered if I would put a workshop together on making bread. And I said, Teresa, nobody makes bread anymore. They either buy it or use the bread machine. So I said, let's do something with biscotti. And she didn't know what they were. She was from China. And so we had a biscotti workshop.
And you have a lot of biscotti recipes in your book. Even Swedish biscotti, I noticed.
That happened because I had a visitor. It was a student from abroad that was studying here, and he was living with me. And when his parents came to visit, I must have had some, and she said, we make them too. And so she sent me her recipe. That was her recipe.
That's great. Tom is next in Bristol. Go ahead, Tom.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I was lucky to receive a cookbook for Christmas this year from an aunt that lives in Iowa. And she is a snowbird that goes down to Arizona every year and probably has been doing so for about 20 years. And the group, or the park where she lives, put together a cookbook. So this is put together, it's about 360 pages of all the ladies that live in her trailer park. And I know 1 or 2 of your callers had asked about possibly information on how to publish a book like this or get it printed.
Yes.
And in the back of this cookbook, there is a listing for the company that put this particular one together. I don't know if you'd want that information over the air or not.
Yeah, sure.
The company is in Deep River, Iowa, and it's called Brennan Printing, Brennan, Brennan Printing at 100 Main Street. And they have an 800 number, 800-448-3740. And this is a company that specializes, I'm sure we've all seen, or you've all seen, cookbooks from churches and other organizations, and this is the type of book I think they kind of specialize, but they also, I think, do it for individuals.
Okay.
And if nothing else, if you call that 800 number, they say in the back of their book that they have over 40 different cookbooks to choose from.
Wow.
You can also get from them. So I guess they always keep a few copies of, whatever organization works through them.
Well, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Again, that number is 1-800-448-3740 for Brennan Printing. And Donna's next in Green Bay. Hi, Donna. Go ahead.
Hi. Shortly after my father died, my mother was in her late 70s, and she was worried because she didn't have money anymore to buy Christmas presents for all her grandchildren. And so one day I sat down with her and I says, you know what, these kids would really love to have the recipes for all of the goodies you've been making for them for years. And I asked her, she thought it was a great idea, and so she started thinking about it and sorted and pulled out the recipes she wanted. And then I sat down and typed them and made sure that they were readable and that the kids could deal with it, and she helped me with defining them. But those recipe books have been just really treasured.
Well, what a great gift idea.
Mm-hmm.
How wonderful.
Yeah, that has been just a real treasure for the family. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much. Carrie is next in Brookfield. Hi, Carrie. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, 2 years ago I made a recipe book from my grandma's recipes. She was a Polish cook and liked desserts. And some of the recipes had interesting comments. Like she said she'd got one on their first plane trip in 1976 or so, and she and my grandpa were both in their 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be elaborate. I did it on the computer and had copies made for my aunts and my cousins. My son did a picture for the cover, so we scanned that in and did a color copy for the cover. And
a treasure.
Yes. My brother's quote starts the book. It says, "Christmas at Grandma's always included an assortment of goodies on top of the radio." They had a big shortwave console radio. My favorites were the melt-in-your-mouth sugar cookies and the peanut blossoms. Once those were consumed, all was right in the world.
I would give my eye teeth to have had a collection of my grandmother's recipes. In those days, we didn't think of such things.
No.
And sometimes it's too late. So I hope that idly the great example that you're giving
Thank you.
will be replicated in many, many, many families. Tell us a little bit about the biscotti recipe that you're going to let us post on our website.
The biscotti one I would like you to try is the traditional one, and it's sugar and butter and anise seed and anise flavoring or other liqueur. There is a little bit of whiskey or brandy. Now, I might add right away that if you don't have, and then it says 2 cups of coarse chopped almonds and walnuts. It doesn't matter what nut it is. It could be the almonds. It can be the walnuts or the almonds. But don't feel like you have to go out and buy. Sometimes the anise flavoring is like $3. And if you have some anise liqueur, you can use that as a substitute.
Nice practical tip. So we will post idly Chiappetta Siewert's recipe for traditional biscotti on our website at wpr.org/Faraka, all about food. And you can get a copy of La Cucina direct from the author by writing to Post Office Box 186 54494. I'm Jean Faraka. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Ida Lee, for being with us. You can get a copy of the program from the radio store, 1-800-747-7444. This is 104E.